Hello everyone, my name is Tyler, and this is my brother Alex, and we're the creators of a television documentary series called The Water Brothers.
In our show, we have an amazing opportunity to go around the world making documentaries and telling stories about some of the biggest environmental challenges we face in the world today. And we focus on water simply because water is at the heart of every single environmental challenge we face. And after the past 3.5 years traveling to well over 35 countries, it has completely changed and broadened our perspective on the challenges that we face. Water issues are complex, they are interrelated, and if we want to solve them, it's going to require us to make hard choices with big sacrifices. But the solutions do exist. What we lack today is motivation on a global scale. And we believe that one of the only ways to do that is to educate and inform as many people as possible about the scale and scope of challenges that we face, so that we can see the action we need on a daily level in our daily lives.
But how do we motivate people? How do we inspire them to become part of the solution? Well, there are many ways we can do this, but we think one of the most important ways is to get people engaged and learn about the many challenges we face, because people can't become part of the solution unless they know the problems. And there, unfortunately, are many problems we face in the world today. Over 1 billion people on the planet struggle to survive because they lack access to clean, safe, fresh drinking water. And over 2.5 billion people live without a toilet or proper sanitation.
For our oceans, well, to sum it up, they are running out of fish and filling up with plastic. Just over 1.5 years ago, my brother and I were on an expedition, a 3-week sailing expedition across the Pacific Ocean, to a place some of you may have heard of, called the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And after sailing for 2 weeks and reaching the heart of the garbage patch and sampling for plastic the entire way, what we found is that it's not just the garbage patch that is filled with plastic. It is, in fact, the entire ocean. And we know we are connected to this issue back here at home because we followed up that expedition with a trip right in the Great Lakes to Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. And we found, with the scientists, even higher concentrations of plastic in our Great Lakes than we found even in the heart of the garbage patches, the 5 garbage patches that exist throughout the ocean. So we know that we are the source of plastic pollution in our urban areas. It is flowing down our rivers and lakes and then out to sea.
Many of the world's most iconic rivers are being dammed and diverted to create energy and irrigate farmland. Many other rivers are so polluted due to industrial activity that almost nothing can survive in their waters. And there are many parts of the ocean and lakes around the world that are running out of oxygen due to nutrient pollution running off of farmland, down rivers and streams into our lakes and oceans. And this nutrient pollution fuels massive algae blooms, like you can see here. This is Lake Erie. So big you can see them from space. And when these algae blooms eventually die and sink to the bottom of the seafloor, bacteria eats away at it, and in the process consumes all the oxygen in the water, creating what are known as dead zones, where almost nothing can survive. In the 1960s, there was 49 dead zones around the globe. Today, there are over 400, and that number is doubling every decade.
We're also living in the midst of what some scientists are calling the 6th mass extinction. Extinction rates today are anywhere from 1,000 to 10,000 times the natural extinction rate. And some of the highest rates of biodiversity loss are being seen in our oceans and freshwater ecosystems, with nearly 20% of all freshwater aquatic species now threatened with extinction. The main difference today from the previous mass extinctions is that we are the sole cause of what's going on today.
And one of the biggest challenges we all face, and I know all of you are aware of, is climate change. Unfortunately, too many people today think of climate change as just global warming. But climate change is much more than just an increase in the average global temperature. Climate change is about water, because the ways we are going to experience and suffer from climate change are directly related to how it affects our oceans and freshwater resources. Water is on the move on this planet like never before, and it's moving in unpredictable ways. Whether it's melting glaciers and ice caps changing the makeup of our oceans and rising sea levels, or more frequent and intense droughts, floods, extreme weather events, changing rainfall patterns. These are the ways that we are going to suffer from climate change.
So we've given you a taste of some of the major problems that we face, and there are immense challenges. They can seem overwhelming. A lot of what we do in our show to try and get people motivated is to look into the future. Work with scientists to look into the future, these dire predictions of what the next 20 to 50 to 100 years could be like, to motivate change today so we can avoid these disaster scenarios. But over the course of filming nearly 20 episodes now and doing it for several years, what we found is that some of the most powerful examples to motivate change are not found in looking into the future when none of us may be alive. It is by looking into the past and using our past mistakes to motivate change and show people that now is the time to change our ways.
So what can we learn from the past about how to harmonize our relationship with water? How do we harmonize our relationship with the blue planet? Well, there are many stories and examples we could talk to you today about because water and humans are so inextricably tied. But there's two stories that we want to talk to you today about some of the trips that we've done filming our television show.
The first story about learning from the past is from an episode we have just recently been filming, all about sustainable seafood, where we were trying to connect people here in Canada and around the world to where their seafood comes from, how it was caught or farmed, and how it got to their table, because we are disconnected from seafood. We wanted to do this episode simply because the most immediate threat to the health of our oceans is from overfishing. 90% of all the large predatory fish in the ocean, tuna, swordfish, sharks, salmon, 90% of them have been fished out. And there's a battle ongoing right now to take out the last 10%.
And one of the biggest contributors to the problem of overfishing is from a method of fishing known as bottom trawling. Now, how bottom trawling basically works is fishermen take huge nets that can often have mouths as wide as a football field, and they drag them across the ocean floor to catch things like shrimp and cod. Bottom trawling is responsible for about half of all the seafood that's caught on the planet today. And it's such a popular method of fishing because it's such an easy way to catch fish.
So it is very effective at catching lots of fish. But the problem with bottom trawling is that it is an extremely inefficient method of catching fish. When you drag a net along the ocean floor, you don't just pick up what you're intending to catch, you take up everything else living on the bottom with it. And it creates huge amounts of what's known as bycatch, where you kill indiscriminately species that you're not intending to catch. For shrimp, for example, bycatch rates are as high as, for every pound of shrimp you catch as much as 10 pounds of marine life that comes up dead in the nets. So think about that next time you order a shrimp cocktail that was caught in the wild using bottom trawling methods. But it's not just the fact that you're causing these huge amounts of bycatch and killing indiscriminately. You're also killing the corals, the structure. You're destroying this habitat for all these creatures to live that they need again to come back to that area. And on top of that, you're not just taking the adult animals with you either. You're also taking the juveniles up in that net. So you're leaving no habitat and no baby animals to reproduce that population.
And this is a lesson we learned the hard way here in Canada in the 1990s, where after decades of unsustainable fishing practices like bottom trawling, the once iconic cod fishery collapsed. And overnight, 40,000 jobs were lost. Entire communities changed forever. A fishing ban was put in place in hopes of helping the fish stocks recover from the brink of annihilation. But now it's almost 25 years later, and there's no signs that the fish stocks, the cod stocks, are ever going to return to the numbers they once were.
It certainly was like a tough lesson to learn, and something that we've been struggling to deal with here in Canada when we talk about fisheries. But of course, how can we blame ourselves? We only just learned just how destructive bottom trawling could be in the 90s when it wiped out such a massive fishery. The truth is that we have known about the destruction of bottom trawling for a very, very long time. And if you want the first example of when people were complaining about bottom trawling, you have to go all the way back to 1376. That was when a group of Scottish fishermen went to British Parliament in London and complained and wanted a petition on what was then known as the beam trawl. The beam trawl operated just like bottom trawlers work today. And the fishermen complained that these beam trawls were wiping out the habitat. They were taking up all the juvenile fish, and they were killing indiscriminately and taking up all other types of fish. So you would think that nearly 700 years later, we would have learned our lesson. But in fact, bottom trawling has only become more and more popular since then. But today, we know the mistakes we've made, and it is time that we change the way that we catch fish to save our oceans and create a healthier fish population for generations to come.
The next story we want to tell you about is from one of the very first episodes Alex and I ever filmed. And during this episode, we took a journey down the Mekong River. And on this journey, we got an amazing opportunity to check out the ancient temples of Angkor. Angkor is an ancient civilization that rose on the banks of the Tonle Sap, or Great Lake in Cambodia during the 12th century. And at its height, it was home to a population of over 1 million people. And it was believed to be the biggest city during that time. And it was the capital of an empire that stretched across much of Southeast Asia.
So how did they do it? How did they create the biggest city in the ancient world for its time? They did it by mastering their water resources. They built an immense series of canals, dikes, reservoirs, and water infrastructure to move water from the Tonle Sap Lake, 20 kilometers away, to the heart of the city of Angkor. But within a few decades, it all fell apart, a few decades after it reached its height. And many archaeologists believe that it was directly tied to its water infrastructure. There was a number of factors that did play in. There was war, changing religion, power struggles in the region. And all of these factors caused the people of Angkor, the Khmer people, to ignore their water infrastructure. They could no longer have the workforce to maintain their canals and dikes and reservoirs. They were too busy with all these other things. But the final nail in the coffin for the people of Angkor was, in fact, climate change. During the end of the 15th century, there was a period known as the Little Ice Age. It got very cold in the northern latitudes, and in the tropics, where Angkor is in Cambodia, it got very, very wet in the wet season and very dry in the dry season. So as these climate changes hit the crumbling water infrastructure of Angkor, many of these reservoirs and dikes were washed away, and there was no water left in the longer dry season to keep people there. After a few decades, most of the people abandoned the city, and it was lost for 400 years. It was covered in jungle and never rediscovered again until the 19th century.
So what can we learn from the story of Angkor? Well, it's that even the greatest civilizations are vulnerable to changes in climate. Today, almost half of the world's population lives in megacities that dwarf Angkor, yet we share many similarities with them. We too are ignoring our water infrastructure. In cities around the world today, about half of all the water that's treated is lost in the pipes through leaks before it ever reaches someone's tap. Here in Canada, we have $80 billion in shortfalls to repair things like leaking pipes, create new wastewater and water treatment facilities, and to upgrade stormwater drainage canals. And this is something we experienced just last summer here in Toronto and in Calgary with the massive floods. Our water infrastructure wasn't prepared. We haven't adapted to deal with the massive amounts of water that climate change is going to be bringing our way.
So if we want to change the way that we bring water to our cities, adapt to climate change, and change the way that we catch fish throughout the world, the best learning lessons and motivation can come from our past. For us, when we look back and look at the 700 or 1,000 years it's taken us to learn these lessons, there is one difference that exists today. It's the power and speed at which we can share knowledge. These tools were not available to the Scottish fishermen or to the people of Angkor. But today, we can learn from our mistakes of the past and initiate the change we need to see on a daily basis to create a healthier ocean and a healthier planet, and make sure we are prepared and adapted for climate change, and do as much as possible to avoid collapse. And if you want motivation, look no further than this glass of water. This glass of water is over 3.5 billion years old. It's been here almost as long as the planet itself, and it will continue to be here long after we may all be gone. But our future is not guaranteed. This water's future is. But if we want to ensure and guarantee our future, it is completely dependent on how we care for water and how we care for the fish in the ocean and make sure they are there for lasting generations. Our actions today will have lasting effects far into the future, and it is time now that we learn from our mistakes in the past and and make the changes that we want to see.
The big lesson is that we've known about these problems for hundreds of years, but today we have the technology, we have the capacity and the know-how to solve massive problems like climate change and to adapt to things like overfishing.
The only question that remains is, will we learn from our mistakes soon enough before it is too late? Thank you.